If you've ever been told, sometimes without words, that your efforts simply don't matter, then you already know a piece of my story. My name is Natalie Greene. I'm 25 now, but this moment still lives inside me like it happened yesterday. It was my older brother Dylan's high school graduation, and we were both standing in the living room in our Sunday best. The entire family buzzed with excitement, snapping photos, uncorking sparkling cider. Then I heard it. "She's the one we know will go far," my dad said to my uncle, nodding proudly toward Dylan. "Natalie? She's sweet, but probably not the academic type." I was 13. That wasn't the first time I'd been dismissed, and it definitely wasn't the last. But that moment, that one carved something deep. We grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Small town, wide skies, and a community where reputations were passed down like heirlooms. My father ran a car dealership, and my mother worked nights as a nurse. We weren't poor, but we were careful. Still, there always seemed to be enough for Dylan's guitar lessons, AP prep classes, and summer camps in the Rockies. When I asked to join art club, Mom sighed and said, "We'll see if there's room next year." There never was. At first, I thought maybe they just didn't see me the way I saw myself. Curious, hardworking, quietly ambitious. I brought home perfect report cards, made it to state and math competitions, and even won the 8th grade science fair with a water filtration prototype. But at every turn, my parents' focus was fixed on Dylan's future. Once, when I mentioned wanting to attend Stanford after watching a documentary on female engineers, Dad laughed. "Let's aim for something realistic, Nat. Maybe a local college, closer to home, you know?" He didn't say I wasn't smart. He didn't have to. That slow accumulation of small cuts, being overlooked, underestimated, forgotten, left a scar not visible in photos. It taught me how to smile through disappointment and hide ambition like it was shameful. And by the time high school rolled around, I had stopped asking for anything. If love had conditions, I wasn't going to keep failing the test. But here's the part they never saw coming. I wasn't giving up. I was storing every moment like fuel. And one day, I was going to burn brighter than they ever imagined. How many children have quietly folded their dreams because no one looked up long enough to notice them? And if you're a parent, a teacher, or a grandparent, do you truly see the quiet ones in your life? Because sometimes the loudest potential speaks in silence, and we only realize what we've missed when it's too late. The summer before college should have been filled with excitement. For most families, it's a time of planning, shopping, long talks about the future. But in our home, the conversations felt like a one-way street, lined with detours and dead ends that always circled back to Dylan. We had both received acceptance letters. Dylan was going to Duke for economics, and I had been accepted to the prestigious Summit Institute of Technology in Colorado. It wasn't just a win, it was my dream. A full acceptance into the engineering program. I remembered trembling as I opened that envelope on the front porch, sunlight spilling over the words, "Congratulations." That evening, I waited until dinner to share the news. I imagined the reaction, the pride, the excitement. I was wrong. "That's great, sweetheart," Mom said, barely glancing up from her phone. Dad nodded, distracted, already asking Dylan if he'd looked into housing deposits at Duke. No celebration, no congratulations, not even a second question about my plans. Just silence that confirmed what I had long feared. My success wasn't part of their narrative. 3 days later, the truth landed like a punch to the stomach. "We've been talking about college expenses," Dad said, as we sat at the kitchen table. "We've saved enough to fully support Dylan. He needs to focus on his studies. Your situation is a little different." "How different?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "We just assumed you'd figure things out. You're resourceful. Maybe consider community college first, or look into student loans." There it was, the fork in the road I hadn't seen coming. One path paved and well lit, the other left to be hacked through by hand. I nodded slowly, numb. "So you had a college fund? And I was never even part of that plan?" Dad looked away. "We had to make choices. Dylan's career path has always been clear. You've shifted a lot. Art, math, engineering, it's been hard to keep up. Shifted? I had evolved, adapted, survived. But in his eyes, it was flakiness. I excused myself quietly and went upstairs, shutting the door gently, afraid even my rage wasn't worth a scene. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the acceptance packet still spread across my desk. I'd imagined them framing the letter, calling grandma, telling neighbors. Instead, I was invisible in my own victory. But I wasn't done. I spent the next 3 weeks applying for every scholarship I could find. Regional grants, women in STEM initiatives, even niche awards from local Rotary clubs. I reopened my tutoring services, doubled my hours at the diner, and started freelancing online for odd tech gigs, fixing broken laptops, recovering passwords, building basic websites. When my parents left for a weekend college prep retreat with Dylan, I took the bus to Denver and toured Summit alone. I stood on campus, breathing in the mountain air, promising myself I would find a way to return, not just as a student, but as someone no one could ignore. By August, I had secured enough to cover my first semester. Barely. Tuition, books, and a bed in a tiny off-campus apartment with 2 strangers. No room for error, no room for luxury. But I had something far more important than their financial support: the fire to make it work. They had chosen Dylan, but I was choosing myself. The first morning in my new apartment was a brutal awakening, both literal and emotional. The mattress was thin, my back sore from sleeping on springs, and the cracked window let in a cold draft despite it being late August. My roommates were polite but distant, 2 seniors who had clearly only taken me in because I covered rent on time. The place smelled faintly of mildew and leftover fast food. I remember staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. Was I crazy for thinking I could pull this off alone? But I didn't let myself spiral. I got up, made coffee with the tiny machine I bought at a thrift store, and opened my laptop to check my budget spreadsheet for the 5th time that week. Every dollar had a job. No margin for mistakes. I would be attending the Summit Institute full-time while working 25 to 30 hours a week. My days were already carved into blocks: class, work, study, sleep, repeat. While Dylan's Instagram showed off his perfectly decorated Duke dorm and welcome BBQ selfies, I was learning how to clean mold out of a shared fridge and budgeting $12 for groceries. But even in the chaos, something started to awaken in me. My first class was Introduction to Systems Engineering. I expected to feel overwhelmed, out of place, like an imposter. Instead, I was electrified. The lecture lit something up in my brain that had been dimmed by years of neglect and dismissal. Concepts like feedback loops and constraint optimization made sense. And not just theoretically, I could connect them to my actual life. Managing time, resources, stress. It was all one big real-world system, and I had already been engineering my own survival without even knowing it. By the second week, I was participating more than anyone else in my row. The professor, Dr. Sharma, pulled me aside after class. "Ms. Greene, your questions suggest real depth. Have you studied these concepts before?" "No," I replied, still catching my breath from the sprint between work and lecture. "But I've lived them." She smiled, eyes twinkling. "That's sometimes the best education." I started to find a rhythm. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., study for 2 hours before my shift at the campus coffee kiosk, attend classes, then work evening shifts at a local tech repair shop. Meals were quick and cheap: rice, canned beans, microwaved eggs. But I always kept instant coffee stocked. That caffeine and sheer grit fueled me through 16-hour days. Some nights, I'd collapse into bed, too tired to even undress, my body sore, eyes heavy. But my heart pulsed with something unfamiliar: pride. No one was cheering for me at home, but I was building a version of myself that didn't need the applause. By mid-semester, I had made an impression in the engineering department. Dr. Sharma recommended me for a paid lab assistant role, which would mean slightly fewer hours at my jobs and more academic exposure. When I received the email confirming the position, I cried. Really cried, for the first time since arriving. It wasn't just about the money, it was the validation. Someone finally saw me for who I was, not through the lens of comparison, not as Dylan's quieter sibling or a girl too scattered to invest in, but as Natalie Greene, the engineering student with a sharp mind and a relentless work ethic. I printed that email and taped it to the wall above my desk. My first win. The next came from an unexpected direction. One evening, while cleaning out old emails, I saw a message from my high school math teacher, Ms. Everett. She had written after hearing I got into Summit and offered to connect me with an alumna she had once taught, now working in tech in Boulder. "I just thought of you today," her message read. "You were the most quietly determined student I ever taught. Don't let anyone tell you your path is less valid. You're exactly where you belong." That message cracked something open inside me. I realized how long I'd been waiting, aching for a voice like that. And when I reread it, I didn't just feel seen. I felt remembered. I started compiling those moments, emails, kind comments from professors, even friendly nods from classmates. I called it my resilience file. Whenever the exhaustion crept in or my imposter syndrome flared up, I'd revisit that file and remind myself of who I was building. Because make no mistake, I wasn't just building a degree, I was building a life. Meanwhile, back home, the silence continued. My parents called occasionally, always asking how Dylan was adjusting or whether I'd considered transferring closer to home. I answered politely but briefly. I had nothing to prove anymore, and nothing left to explain. I wasn't the overlooked daughter. I was becoming the woman no one saw coming. By the time spring semester arrived, something had shifted. Not just in my routine, but in the way others began to view me. I was no longer the quiet girl in the back of the lecture hall. I was Natalie Greene, lab assistant, systems optimization scholar, and the creator of a growing side business helping local small businesses digitize their operations. It had started almost accidentally. A hardware store owner needed a simple website. I built it over a weekend and got paid in both cash and hardware gift cards. Word spread. Soon, I was juggling 3 to 5 clients each month, all small businesses in Boulder, looking for affordable tech solutions. It wasn't glamorous. I was doing web design, POS integration, sometimes troubleshooting internet issues that boiled down to unplugged routers. But the feedback was immediate and real. I wasn't just learning theories. I was applying them to the messy, beautiful chaos of the real world. And for the first time, I was winning. Dr. Sharma became more than just a professor. She became a mentor. She introduced me to a startup incubator on campus and encouraged me to apply for a student entrepreneurship grant. I was skeptical. Who would fund a sleep-deprived 19-year-old running tech gigs out of a studio apartment? But I applied anyway and won. The $5,000 grant gave me breathing room to upgrade my equipment, hire a freelance developer part-time, and attend a regional small business tech conference as both participant and presenter. The conference became a turning point. After my session, where I spoke on bootstrapped tech solutions for underserved communities, a local investor approached me. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said, handing me his card. "You're solving real problems. Let's talk more." I remember sitting in my apartment that night, staring at the business card, realizing I wasn't chasing opportunity anymore. I was becoming it. But as my world opened, my family remained stuck in its old frame. Dylan was struggling. Despite all the investment, financial and emotional, his first year at Duke hadn't gone smoothly. He switched majors twice, dropped a class mid-semester, and was rumored to be on academic probation. I found out through a mutual friend from high school, not from him. Not from my parents. When Mom did call, it was to ask if I'd be coming home for Dylan's birthday in April. "We're throwing him a party, just something small. You could take the bus home Friday night and help with decorations." I almost laughed. "I can't. I'm presenting at a campus event that weekend." "A presentation?" she asked, confused. "Is it like a class assignment?" "Number, it's a regional pitch event for student-led businesses. I'm a finalist." "Oh," her voice deflated. "Well, maybe next time." Click. The disconnect stung, but less than it used to. Their world had always orbited Dylan. I had stopped trying to shift its gravity. The day of the pitch event arrived, and for the first time, I stepped on stage not as a student desperate to prove something, but as a founder with a vision. My business, Green Tech Solutions, was now serving a dozen active clients, and my pitch focused on scalable digital tools for rural business owners. The panel asked sharp questions, but I had sharper answers. I spoke with clarity, confidence, and conviction, because every tool I pitched, I had already built. Every pain point, I had lived through. When they announced the winners, my name came first. Natalie Greene, first place, $10,000 grant, and a feature in the university's Innovation Journal. Applause thundered through the room. I looked out at the crowd and imagined, for just a second, what it would feel like to see my parents there. But they weren't. They were lighting candles for Dylan's cake 2 states away. Later that week, the article featuring my win went live on the university website. It included photos, an interview, and a quote from Dr. Sharma. Natalie's resilience is matched only by her creativity. She's not just a student, she's a leader. That was the moment it all came full circle. The email landed in my parents' inbox, forwarded by a family friend. I knew they saw it, because 2 days later, I received a text from Dad. Impressive article. You've really built something. Proud of you. It wasn't much, no phone call, no apology. But after years of silence, it felt like thunder. A week after that, I received a second email. This time from the Office of Student Affairs. Natalie, we're pleased to inform you that you've been nominated to deliver a student address at next semester's Innovation Showcase. Congratulations on your impact and leadership at Summit. I read it over and over. I had gone from the girl whose parents wouldn't invest in her future to the woman whose name was being printed on banners and event flyers, whose journey was being held up as a model of what was possible when belief came from within. I didn't need them to validate me anymore. The world was doing it for them. Graduation season arrived in a blur of deadlines, final projects, and back-to-back client meetings. I was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and the kind of momentum that builds only after years of being told you're not enough, and then realizing you were more than they ever imagined. The night before the Innovation Showcase, I stood alone in my apartment, holding the dress I'd saved up for. It was a deep navy blue, simple, strong, exactly how I wanted to feel. My cap and gown hung by the window, fluttering slightly from the spring breeze. I glanced at my reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because I had changed, but because I had finally become. The showcase wasn't just another school event. It was Summit's version of a TED conference, an evening where the university celebrated student leaders, entrepreneurs, and changemakers. I had been chosen to deliver the closing address. My name was printed last on the official program, listed under Keynote Natalie Greene, Resilience in Innovation. As I stepped onto the stage, the auditorium lights blinding and warm, I felt the weight of every moment that had led me here. I scanned the audience, professors, investors, students, reporters, and 2 unexpected faces seated near the back. My parents. Their expressions were unreadable from the stage, but their presence sent a shockwave through me. I hadn't invited them. Someone must have forwarded the program. Part of me wondered if they came for damage control, so no one could say they missed their daughter's big moment. But another part, the softer one I'd fought to protect, hoped it meant something else. I took a breath. Then I spoke. I wasn't the obvious choice. Not for this school, not for success, not even for my own family. The crowd stilled. I grew up in a house where ambition was praised in my brother and questioned in me, where being resourceful meant I'd be left to figure things out on my own, where acceptance letters came with silence, not celebration. I let that linger. But I came anyway, with duct-taped dreams and a $200 laptop. I worked nights, lived off instant noodles, and pitched websites to strangers at corner cafes. I wasn't building a resume. I was building survival. And somehow, in all of that noise, I found clarity. My voice didn't shake. Not once. I don't stand here today because it was easy. I stand here because every closed door became a blueprint. Every doubt became data. Every "you can't" became code I rewrote. And now, I get to build doors for others. The audience erupted in applause. After the speech, I was swarmed. Students asking for advice, faculty offering congratulations, a reporter requesting an interview for a regional business journal. But my eyes kept drifting toward the back, where my parents lingered by the exit. Eventually, they approached. My mother spoke first. "You were incredible," she said, voice brittle but sincere. "We had no idea how much you've been doing." "You didn't ask," I replied. Not out of anger, but truth. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "It's not that we weren't proud of you. We just assumed you were okay." "That's the problem," I said, softly but firmly. "You assumed. You invested in one child and left the other to sink or swim. You didn't even notice when I started swimming laps." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was the sound of reckoning. For the first time, I saw in their eyes not defensiveness, but regret. "We were wrong," Mom admitted. "You deserved more. We should have seen you." "You didn't," I said, "and I needed to stop waiting for you to." They both nodded. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't healing, but it was honest. Before they could say more, a familiar voice called out from behind me. It was Dr. Sharma, flanked by two representatives from a tech venture fund I had met at the pitch competition. "Natalie, we'd like to talk about your business," one of them said. "Have you considered full-scale funding?" My father blinked. "Wait, your business?" "I run a tech consultancy," I replied. "It serves nearly 30 clients statewide. That's what I've been building while putting myself through school." Dad's mouth opened slightly. Mom covered hers with a trembling hand. That's when it hit them. All the years they spent pouring into Dylan, all the time they assumed I'd fall behind. And I was standing here with a six-figure startup, a national grant, and job offers coming from every direction. They weren't just late. They had bet against the wrong child. The next morning, the university newspaper published a photo from the keynote. Me on stage, smiling, arms open mid-speech. The headline read, "Resilience Engineered. How Natalie Greene Rewired the System." It went viral in our small town. For the first time in my life, people didn't introduce me as Dylan Greene's sister. They introduced Dylan as Natalie Greene's brother. Graduation day was perfect. Clear skies, crisp air, and the kind of spring sunlight that made everything feel lighter, freer. I walked across the Summit Institute stage to a standing ovation, accepting my degree with honors in systems engineering and a minor in business innovation. My stole shimmered under the lights, embroidered with the words, "Built not given," a phrase I had come to live by. My name was announced last. Natalie Greene, student keynote, founder of Green Tech Solutions, recipient of the President's Award for Entrepreneurial Impact. The applause was louder than I expected. Professors stood. Students I'd never met clapped. Dr. Sharma wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. In the crowd, I spotted my parents, smaller now in my eyes than they'd ever been, clapping politely, looking proud, yes, but out of place in a moment that no longer needed them to be meaningful. This was my moment, not theirs. Later that afternoon, I hosted a small gathering at a rooftop cafe downtown. My team was there, classmates who had become partners, roommates who had become family. Zoe flew in from the East Coast just to celebrate with me. Dr. Sharma arrived with a bottle of vintage champagne and hugged me like I was her own daughter. "This isn't just a beginning, Natalie," she said. "It's your legacy in motion." Her words stayed with me. Legacy. It wasn't just about proving my parents wrong anymore. That had already happened, publicly, unmistakably. It was about what came next, who I'd become beyond the fight. So I made a decision. 3 weeks after graduation, I returned to Summit's financial aid office, not as a student, but as a donor. I want to establish a scholarship, I told the director, for students who weren't seen, who had to fight for every inch. The Natalie Greene initiative launched that summer. It offered not just tuition support, but mentorship and micro grants for students starting small ventures while in school. I funded the first year with my business revenue, because I could, because I wanted to be the hand I never had. The announcement went live on Summit's homepage alongside my story, retold not as a revenge tale, but as a triumph of resilience, resourcefulness, and refusal to stay invisible. When my parents read it, they called. "You're really doing this," Mom said. "You're building something bigger than we ever imagined." "I know," I replied, "and I'm just getting started." We talked more openly that time, not as child and parent, but as adults finally willing to be honest. They apologized again, more fully this time. They admitted they had chosen safety over fairness, comfort over curiosity, that they had feared I'd fail, and in that fear, they'd betrayed my strength. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. And truthfully, I no longer needed their praise. I had built a new family from the ground up, one that believed in me, challenged me, supported me without question or condition. As summer deepened and my business expanded, I moved into a sunlit 2-bedroom apartment overlooking Boulder's Flatirons. I bought a proper mattress, a coffee machine that didn't sputter, and a sleek glass desk where I planned the next 5 years of Green Tech's roadmap. Some nights, I still thought of that 13-year-old girl in the living room, overhearing her father say she wasn't the academic type. And I'd smile, because he was wrong, and I had rewritten the ending. It was late September when I got the call from my sister. "Do you have time to talk?" she asked. Her voice was hesitant, softer than I remembered. Dylan and I had never been close. The gulf between us wasn't just emotional, it was structural. Built by years of quiet reinforcement, his achievements mattered, mine were nice but optional. He had been the default favorite, and I had learned to survive in the shadow. But now that I stood fully outside that shadow, something had shifted. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between Boulder and our hometown. He looked older, tired in a way ambition alone couldn't explain. Over coffee, he spoke carefully, less like the golden boy and more like someone who had been humbled. "I've been following your work," he said. "The scholarship, the business. You've done something really incredible." "Thanks," I replied, guarded. Compliments were new between us. He stirred his drink and then said it. Words I never expected. "I think they hurt us both, Nat, in different ways." That made me pause. "I was always told I was the one who'd succeed," he continued, "and it felt great at first. But eventually, it became a cage. I was terrified to fail. Meanwhile, you had no one watching, and somehow that set you free." I exhaled slowly, letting his words sink in. He wasn't wrong. Their neglect had scarred me, but their pressure had boxed him in. "We were both playing roles we didn't choose," I said quietly. He nodded. We sat in silence for a moment, the clatter of dishes around us filling the space where blame used to live. Before we left, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me something. It was a photo, one I'd never seen. We were kids, standing in front of the old house. I was holding a crayon drawing. He had a soccer medal. I looked happy. He looked distracted. "I found this while cleaning out my room," he said. "Thought you should have it. You've always been the artist and the architect." I tucked the photo into my bag and gave him a small, genuine smile. We weren't best friends, we might never be. But for the first time in our lives, we had met as equals. Two people shaped by the same flawed home, now rebuilding themselves in different ways. As I drove back to Boulder, I glanced at the mountains in the distance. Their shape hadn't changed in centuries, but their meaning shifted daily, depending on how you looked at them, how much you'd climbed, and how far you still had to go. I didn't need Dylan's validation, or my parents', or even the world's, but I had found something better: understanding. And in that moment, it felt almost like freedom. A year after graduation, I stood once again on the Summit Institute campus. But this time, I wasn't a student. I had been invited back to speak to incoming freshmen as part of the university's leadership series. The topic? Turning setbacks into strategy. I stood in the same auditorium where I once presented my first business pitch. Same worn carpet, same humming lights. But this time, my heels didn't shake. I spoke about growing up unseen, about building something from nothing, about the difference between silence and peace. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. The message was universal. Afterward, a student approached me, tears in her eyes. "My parents don't believe in me either," she whispered. "But your story makes me feel like maybe that doesn't matter." It doesn't, I thought. Not in the way you think. That night, I walked the campus alone, just as I had on my first visit, years earlier when no one believed in me but me. Back then, I was fueled by anger, by a desperate need to prove them wrong. Now, I walked with something quieter, stronger. Peace. The past didn't disappear. It didn't need to. It had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I wasn't living in rebellion anymore. I was living in purpose. And as the mountain air cooled around me, I realized something powerful. They may have underestimated me, but I had never underestimated myself. Natalie Greene's story is a powerful reminder that the way we see others, especially our children, can either nurture their potential or unknowingly dim it. For older audiences, many of whom are parents, grandparents, or mentors, this narrative offers a call to reflection. Are we truly listening to the quiet ones? The steady ones? The ones who don't ask, but still hope to be seen? Natalie wasn't loud or demanding, but she was resilient. Her parents' failure to recognize her worth didn't stop her. It redirected her. And though she found success without their support, the pain of being overlooked left lasting marks. This story challenges us to look again at those around us: nieces, nephews, grandchildren, neighbors. The ones who might not speak up but are working twice as hard for half the recognition. Our words and attention can either affirm their path or leave a silence they'll carry for years. It's never too late to see someone fully. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice saying, "I believe in you," to change the course of a life. Let's choose to be that voice, especially for those who've had to believe in themselves for far too long.